Welcome to this week's 2 Men in the Middle. This is where 2 men in the middle of the country get together and talk about politics, current events, and other fun stuff. I'm Craig Huey.
I'm Brandon Koenig.
I think we took our longest break there, Brandon, since the pandemic started. We were off for like 6 weeks.
We did, yeah, because I think our last podcast was right after the war in Ukraine erupted, and so we were analyzing the impact of that just within a week or 10 days after that started.
March 2020, we stopped meeting to podcast because we didn't know if meeting was going to be a deadly thing and if we were all going to be dead. Yeah. So luckily that didn't happen.
Right.
We took 6 weeks off. I was in Florida. My father had a stroke on December 14th, I believe. He's in the hospital for a couple months, so I was down there helping his transition from hospital.
And how is he recovering?
He's doing good. He's doing good. Strokes are a long arc recovery. And it's one thing that and strokes are something that there's so many gray areas. Anytime you ask your doctor or anybody about what's going to happen next, you're always going to you never get a solid answer. It could be this, it could be that, because every stroke is different. But he's doing good. He's back up on his feet. He's doing some walking. He went through his home health care people have been outstanding, and he's heading to outpatient therapy to finish his recovery.
Oh, good.
So he's doing good. So I was down there for 5 weeks. Glad I had the time available to do it, and it was a great experience, spending that much time with my parents and being able to help my dad. So, you hear a lot about caretaking for elderly parents. It is certainly a difficult job, but it's got some rewards to it too.
Yeah.
And I was down in what apparently now is the state that has become the ground zero for all Republican culture war battles, Florida, with Ron DeSantis and his fight with Disney there.
Yeah, and his fights with everybody, right? I mean, between choosing the math textbooks for the state to saying he's going to go after Twitter for denying Elon Musk's takeover bid, which, like, how can he go after Twitter? But yeah, I think the Disney fight is the most critical one, and obviously has the most attention because Disney is such a large tourism draw to Florida, and economic impact cannot be overstated. And people have said this over and over again. But if it wasn't for Disney, there would be nothing in Orlando. It would be a swamp.
Orlando wouldn't exist.
I mean, that's the reason that Universal Studios is there. SeaWorld is there. That's the reason that you have all these other high-tech jobs that have come to Orlando, and the growth and development. It's all been on the back of Disney. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to go after Disney in this way, and particularly on these taxing districts, which have been in place since the 1960s.
Yeah.
Because, as we were saying offline, Disney is not unique in having this type of taxing district structure. You have Daytona Speedway, Orlando International Airport, the Villages in Florida that enjoys
crazy,
this.
Huge retirement village.
Right. And so, the Villages, for those that don't know, is basically a retirement community of homes. It's sprawling. It covers, I don't know how many, tens of thousands of acres.
Yeah.
But it has a population that's up to 180,000 now people, and it has its own zip code, and it's completely maintained and controlled by the developer.
Yeah.
So it's not a city, but it's like a census-designated place because it's so large and sprawling.
And they got famous for their Trump parades.
Yeah,
where
that's
people
right.
would load up their golf carts and do a Trump parade, and their incredibly high incidence of sexually transmitted diseases. That's what the Village is basically known for. Senior
citizens getting frisky.
Bunch of horny, politically active 80-year-olds in the Village.
Right.
So let's back up a little bit. So I want to take this from two different parts. One is from what is traditional Republican orthodoxy and view of the world, and how different what DeSantis is doing than what traditional Republican thought and ideology is, and how far he is separating himself and his version of the Republican Party from what traditional Republicans have, from the beliefs that they have held. Like for example, this is straight payback from the governor to a business for not supporting the parental rights bill that was passed in
absolutely.
Florida.
It's retribution.
And we'll talk about what that bill is and if that's right or wrong, but using the government to directly punish a corporation for their political stance is something that the Republican Party has traditionally very much shied away from.
Absolutely. In fact, they've been critical of the Democratic Party for going after businesses that they don't like.
I mean, their big thing is the market decides. We don't pick winners and losers. Stay out of the way.
Yeah. Well, that used to be, right? I think that was completely turned upside down in the Trump era. And then especially as we went into the pandemic, because you had state legislatures that were then passing laws telling businesses, you can't mandate masks for your employees. You can't mandate COVID test or vaccine requirements, even as a private business. So the Republican Party has increasingly been encroaching on the rights of private businesses to set boundaries and policies for their employees. But DeSantis is taking it to a different level because he's going after private business directly. And for those that need a refresher, this didn't start either with Disney. If you recall, during the pandemic, the cruise industry was implementing mask and testing requirements and vaccine requirements, and DeSantis was going after them, telling them, you can't do this. Again, one of the largest employers and economic impacts of the state. So this is just one example of many where DeSantis has directly targeted businesses when they have a policy he doesn't like. But he, again, takes it a step further because in the latest set of instances, he's going after businesses wielding the power of the state as a form of coercion and intimidation and to when he's unhappy with what they've done. So it's retaliation in this case. It's not just saying we're going to micromanage what you do. It's we're going after you because we don't like something you've said, something you've done, and you're going to face the consequences. We're going to punish you for it. It's punishing businesses for speech or other action they don't like.
So one of the ways DeSantis has moved the Republican Party into kind of his whatever new territory he's going to take them in is one, getting directly involved with businesses. The second thing he's done during the pandemic is I believe he enacted a law that overrode local authority when it came to mask mandates.
Yes.
So he is stepping down. He is stepping into local politics and dictating from the state level. Brandon, I've always heard from Republicans
local
that
control
was a giant no-no. Local control means everything.
Well, and then Republicans started just giving lip service to it, and now they don't even give lip service. It's this idea that the executive should have ultimate sway over what happens at the local level and dictate that. And so the masking is a great example of that. There's other examples from DeSantis. There's other Republican examples just within, even in our state of Kansas, where the state legislature attempted to pass a law that would restrict local municipalities from passing requirements related to banning plastic bags and having requirements on recycling, that they wanted to take that authority away from the local powers that be. So this is part of a broader trend as well within the country.
So, Brandon, is DeSantis doing this as a way to carve out new territory to build the next version of the Republican Party on? Is DeSantis doing this because he doesn't believe in those kind of orthodoxies anymore, and he wants to move the party to a new ideological ground because he feels that's politically more competitive? Is he doing this because he's laying the groundwork and wants to up his name value on the national stage for a 2024 presidential run?
Well, so I don't think it's being done out of ideology specifically. I don't think he's grounded to the ideology of consolidating power, centralizing power, at the state executive level. But it's a means to an end for him, as you mentioned. It's a way for him to build up his presidential ambitions and to build up a base of support. It's a way for him to rise to the front as a front runner within the party. So I think he's leveraging it as a means to an end. I don't know. It's difficult for me to tell whether or not he's a zealous believer in any of this, other than this gets me to where I need to go. And I forgot another example of that is him weighing into the math textbook debate on CRT and equity and the textbooks.
There's not a hot button he has not hit.
No, and the textbook example is another instance of local control being subverted, because usually it's the local school boards and the state school boards that decide textbook curriculum, not the governor, not the legislature weighing into that. So again, it's the state coming in and saying, we're going to make these decisions, not the bodies that were created specifically to handle these matters.
And DeSantis knows if he gets up on the 2024 primary stage, he's going to be flanked on both sides by U.S. senators. And he's going to be able to very effectively start checking off all of these laws he passed in Florida and look at everybody on that stage, because Hawley's going to be on there, Cotton's going to be on there, Cruz is going to be on there, and say, all you guys do is talk. Look what I've done. I've actually taken this fight into the legislative process, and I've produced these laws. So while all these senators up here can talk about what they want to do, let's review kind of my bona fides, my credentialing that I've built up in my 4 years as governor to show you how I would be as president. That is extremely impactful.
Yes,
it really nullifies all of the Republican senators.
It's a MAGA fever dream wish list, right? I mean, it hits upon everything from CRT to mask and vaccine mandates to going after Disney for, the whole grooming, debate and
that's
ridiculousness.
The dumbest thing ever.
And that's a whole nother topic we can weigh into, because that's become a whole thing within itself in terms of a strategy by the party to go after critics it doesn't like and to tag them with that label. But yeah, this is all performative. It's all part of the outrage culture. It's the grievance culture. And it's tied to this idea of moving the Republican Party into a populist direction that's focused solely on grievance and on outrage. And it's really even less about the results than drawing attention to it and showing that you're strong and going to take action. So really the ideology doesn't matter anymore. It's just about using every lever of power at your disposal to just completely obliterate the other side, the opposition, to put them in their place.
I think you just said it. It's about the acquisition of power by any means necessary. And
another good example we did a touch upon that's been understated, but the redistricting saga in Florida, for people that haven't followed that.
He's just doing it all himself now.
Yeah, so the legislature has been battling the governor because they had a redistricting plan that was less ambitious than what the governor liked. The governor wanted to gerrymander it more and draw more Democrats out of the congressional delegation. So they butted heads, and finally the legislature just gave in and said, here, you can
do it.
Draw it yourself and we'll approve it.
Vote.
I mean, think about that. The legislature has abdicated their responsibility. Statutes given responsibility.
They're just following the trend that developed at the national level, at the federal level.
I mean, and letting the executive do this. Yeah. This is not an executive power. And so, I remember flippantly tweeting something out like, legislature, why do they even convene? They can just hand over the reins to the governor and let him, rule by executive fiat.
And don't you get a feeling that that's what they really want to do? What they'd really prefer to do is have the governor make most of these decisions. They react to them either for some sort of political gain that they liked it or they're opposed it if that gives them the political gain. And that's what they do. It feels like anybody in a legislative body, either state or national, is looking for any way not to be able to be held accountable for anything that they've done.
Right. And so a lot of parallels with the U.S. Congress, right, and the authority they've handed over to the executive branch over the last several years because they don't want to be held accountable, which is why more of these battles have shifted to the courts as the finer arbiter, because the legislature won't do its job, its lawmaking authority. So, this is, and it all helps DeSantis. He's been able to amass immense power, over his tenure as governor. And we forget, he's not even done serving his first 4-year term. It feels like much longer just because he's involved himself in every iota of controversy that he could gin up or magnify or amplify.
Well, let's talk about the law, the Don't Say Gay bill, which is that's not a very good title. It's caught on with the left and the media has caught on to it, but it really doesn't accurately, I don't think, describe what this law is.
No, there was an earlier version of the bill that was more problematic that was modified, and so it's not the same bill. So the bill itself that passed now basically specifies K through third what can be taught in terms of gender identity, in terms of
it basically says you can't teach anything. You can't teach any type of gender theory or sexual orientation to K through 3.
So it's not a Don't Say Gay bill, although there is enough ambiguity still in some of the language, which gives pause to some of the opponents who say it's ambiguous enough to where if you have like a gay teacher who has a photo on his desk of his partner and when students ask about it and he says who that is he violating the law then?
And that's the second half of the bill that says even after K through 3, it has to be done in an age-appropriate manner.
Yeah, but it never defines what is age-appropriate, right? And so it's one of those...
So this is where I struggle with these things. As a parent who had 2 kids go through public school, that sounds reasonable. Those are topics that yes, need to be maybe touched upon, but certainly not to be dwelled upon from K through 3. So your first instinct as a parent to say, okay, that doesn't sound unreasonable. But then you get to is this problem happening now? Is this something that's actively happening that we're trying to... What is the size and shape of this
Is this a solution in
problem?
search of a problem?
It certainly feels like that might be.
Because I can't find any examples.
Nobody
where
showed
this has
an
been
example of
issue.
where this was happening. Again, 2 parents brought this lawsuit, but that can be... There's any number of ways to sponsor people doing that. But the first thing I struggle with this issue... The trans issue, no one's ever defined the size and shape of the problem.
Well,
what are we actually talking about?
Well, and I think what's even more problematic at a macro level, if you stand back from all of this, this is one smaller instance in a broader narrative on amplifying pedophilia and making that a big issue. Look at how that came up with KBJ's nomination. That was
Josh Hawley.
That was not by accident, right?
No.
That plays well with the base. It's the QAnon cry, right? The pedophilia scare. It's not unlike, the satanic scare of the 1980s.
I remember that.
Remember the sex abuse, parent sex abuse scare where there were entire groups of parents who were tried and convicted almost like in a witch hunt manner with little to no evidence because of just accusations flying. And so we've gone through this in the past, and it feels like we're entering another phase, but with pedophilia, because now, and this has happened with the governor's spokeswoman in Florida, DeSantis spokeswoman Christine Pashaw on Twitter basically said anybody who opposes this is probably a groomer.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's where we are now in terms, and I've seen this online on social media, myself and other people I know who anything, even if it's not related to this bill, but to other policy, if we start criticizing or asking questions, you get labeled a pedo or a groomer or like that is just what's happening now, which is crazy. So it's part of that larger narrative.
So the first thing I was waiting for is like, okay, well, they're going to trot out some curriculum from the state of Florida that clearly illustrates the problem.
Where this is happening.
They're going to say, okay, here is directly the issue. This is an example of the issue we're talking about. We didn't get any of that.
No.
To my knowledge, no press conference was ever held where they said, and let me show you the state-approved Florida curriculum that we feel is problematic and where this legislation is targeted to. That didn't happen. So is this more about just, I guess the point that I'm trying to get to is this really targeted at teachers? Is this really sending the teacher a message that says, hey, it's your personal behavior in the classroom that this is targeted to? Because this is another one of those laws. It has no legal ramifications to it. It's all civil. A parent can sue, just like the law in Texas. So,
well, that's what's so frustrating and lazy about this, right?
So that's what we're basically saying. We're basically putting a tool in the parent's toolbox that they can more effectively sue you if they feel this is happening. So to me, it feels like this is clearly a message at teachers more than anything to say, watch what you're saying in class.
Yeah, I agree. And have you already picked up on another tenet of traditional conservatism, Republican tenets that this violates?
I mean, local control of school board, that was always a big one.
But also the general principle about being for tort reform against excessive litigation.
That's totally off the table.
That's off the table. I mean
you
between
guys are
Texas,
using tort now. That's
we're using it as a weapon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like fill the courts up, spend money.
As a branch of law enforcement, basically, is what the Republican plan is.
Yeah.
And that's another one. I'm always leery of any plan that it only has a civil
remedy
to it, that there's no actual enforcement of this law. So we've covered a little bit of kind of why this is happening. And again, this is DeSantis kind of putting himself out there, I believe, is saying, I am a better, smarter, more action-oriented version of Donald Trump. And I will use this reputation that I'm building when I decide to make my presidential run.
Well, the one thing I would critique is I don't know that he's going to go say he's smarter. I think he's going to frame it as he's results oriented. He gets results, unlike Donald Trump. Yeah. That's where he can draw the line. And that he's a fighter. Because remember, Trump's big thing always was he's a fighter. And DeSantis can say, no, I'm really the fighter because I get results. Yeah. I get things done.
When I keep going back and forth, when do you think he tries to cash in that political capital? Because running for president is filled with all types of people that told themselves all kinds of delusional lies about they could be president. DeSantis has a window opening in 2024 if he chooses to walk through it. The problem is he may have to deal directly with Donald Trump as a candidate for president. I personally don't think he wants to do that because he knows you don't come out of that clean.
No.
Trump will drag you into waters that you just simply don't want to go, and you're not the same candidate on a national level coming out of a primary with Trump. I think DeSantis is going to hold his powder until 2028. He's going to let the Trump phenomenon completely clear out of the political ether before he steps in for the presidency.
Yeah, I think he's going to be very careful and cautious. I mean, again, this is all predicated on the assumption that Trump does run. And again, it's kind of up in the air depending on the day. And there's part of me that definitely thinks Trump will run. And then there's part of me that thinks maybe he's just doing all this to continue grifting and making money. And that at the end of the day, he's not. I don't know. Because it's hard to tell. But yeah, I think it's all based on that. Because I think if he does run, I mean, he can easily just, save face, and DeSantis can easily just say, I'll wait it out 4 years. I can continue creating my profile, building on my base, and be in a prime position after that. So I could easily see that happening.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's take a minute and talk about Trump, some of his Senate endorsements. Because the big three for Trump, I think the thing that's going to dictate the most kind of how energetic he gets for 2024 rests on Herschel Walker, Dr. Oz, and J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
Those are his three horses that he's betting big on in the Senate. Those are the three things that he's saying, hey, I still have sway and influence. And to say it and to prove that point, I took three completely unqualified, in some ways lunatic individuals, and my endorsement got them elected. If he actually pulls that off and those three actually get elected, Trump rolls to the nomination in 2024. Everybody falls out of the way, I think, at that point in time.
Yeah. And I think in all three of those races too, I mean, are going to be close, and he has a potential to pull out all three of them. It's possible he doesn't. It's possible that he loses two of them, one of them. The dynamics are going to be interesting to see. And right now, Herschel Walker is leading against Raphael Warnock in Georgia. But the one thing is Raphael Warnock is sitting on a war chest of, I think, like over $40 million he hasn't used yet.
And he hasn't even begun firing shots.
So that, and again, I think once people know more about Herschel Walker and how crazy he is, I mean, that's what's scary too, is having somebody who clearly has mental issues.
That's not crazy as a metaphor for strange behavior.
No, it's
that's diagnosable. He is crazy. Diagnosably insane.
Yes, I mean, he has held a gun to his ex-wife's
head
and threatened to kill her.
He thinks he owns a clothing factory that he keeps talking about on the trail that nobody has any idea of what he's talking about.
And let's not forget that the party so far has kept him very isolated and insulated from the media. So they've only sent him on friendly shows on Fox. And
he can't even get through Judge Judy. Or who's the wacky financial gal, Maria Bartiromo?
Yeah.
I think those are the only two people he's done Fox interviews with, and they've even had to help him through.
Oh, Judge Jeanine and
Judge Jeanine,
yeah.
I heard that McConnell and Cruz have taken him under their wing,
as well,
and they're trying to educate him on basic tenets of conservatism and just basic GOP talking points. That's it, and they are stunned that he can't pick up hardly any of this. But if I'm Trump, nothing tells people you should fear me more than getting those three buffoons elected to the Senate. Dr. Oz is still a Turkish citizen, I think, for God's sake.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, then he would be able to run technically, right?
I saw something where it's like,
is he a dual citizen?
He has dual
citizenship.
Okay, that he would give up his Turkish citizenship if he were elected to the U.S. Senate.
And see, that's one where the MAGA base, some of them were surprised by his endorsement there, when nobody should have been surprised, because Dr. Oz is a personality, media personality like Trump. It's birds of a feather. Why would Trump endorse somebody who's like-minded and same mold?
Herschel Walker's a celebrity. I had a friend we were texting back and forth, which like, how is this man running for Senate? He obviously has a lot of holes, let's say.
Yeah.
How is this happening? And I tried to explain to him, if you're a 50-year-old dude in Georgia, you probably still have a Herschel Walker poster somewhere in your closet that you're hiding from your wife that you refuse to take down. Herschel Walker is a god in Georgia. He won a football championship in the 80s. I mean, his name value is off the chart. Herschel Walker is probably going to win that just on his football career alone.
Yeah.
That's the type of people that are attracted to Trump and that Trump likes. These are all three of these folks, throwing J.D. Vance in there now. They're just empty vessels that Trump knows he can pour whatever he wants into.
The only caveat there is, I believe, because of Georgia's runoff law, and depending on if there's a third-party candidate, that can throw a wrench into the mix. So just like what happened last time around.
Yeah, I think Herschel Walker is going to roll to that seat pretty easily.
See, that's the one where I disagree, where I think it's possible, again, if he can be defined, which I think there's still a chance to with all the stuff about him, where that might be a closer race. So I'm not ready to call that one in yet.
J.D. Vance basically gave an interview where he said if Trump was elected, the advice that he would give him is to fire every bureaucrat in the federal government and replace him with his people. You can see me air quote his people.
Right.
J.D. Vance might be the scariest human running for Senate.
I think so. If you see what he's said on social media, and I mean how he just plays directly into this, and in a way that's very dark and very cruel and very ominous. I mean, don't forget too that J.D. Vance is funded by Peter Thiel, the PayPal guy, who is trying to remake conservatism.
He's a chaos guy. He wants everything to burn.
Right. So, I think that's going to be even more problematic. And I would actually rate that race as even more likely to flip to the Democrats, unfortunately, just based on the dynamics of Ohio as well. Because I think the one thing that makes Georgia a little bit difficult to forecast even like a year out is that it is evolving. I mean, the changing demographics, younger people moving into the state because of the job growth in the Atlanta area. Like, there's been so much change in Georgia. Ohio, not so much. Ohio, there are people that are just flooding in. They haven't even seen any significant population growth, I don't think, over the last decade. They've seen a lot of loss of Rust Belt jobs. Ohio's older, wider. It's a more stagnant state. And if you look at over the last several elections, the Republican advantage has only grown, that gap in presidential elections.
Let me ask you this question, Brandon. In the last 3 years in the state of Georgia, what's the biggest news story to come out of Georgia?
In the last 3 years?
Last 3 years.
Absent the election itself?
Just what's the most exciting, what's the biggest news coming out of Georgia?
I don't know.
If you lived in Georgia, what's the biggest news?
I'm blanking out here. I'm forgetting
University
something.
of Georgia won the National Football Championship last year.
That's right. That
dominates everything. Herschel Walker is going to start running ads of him in that uniform in the 80s. He's going to link it to the new program.
The legacy.
The coach is going to come out and give him an endorsement, and that race is done.
You think
it's
that'll be
over?
Yeah.
I just don't see how. It doesn't matter. All of this ugly stuff about his past is going to come up. It's all relevant in a campaign. None of it's going to make a damn bit of difference.
At the end of the day,
Because we're into this it's a zero-sum game. All the Republicans want is the seat. They'll put anybody in there that has the ability to win it. If they're qualified or not is completely and totally irrelevant.
Right.
And they'll run a campaign that it's completely and totally irrelevant. He doesn't go to any debates. Why? He doesn't have to. Everybody knows me. I'm Herschel Walker. Go Dogs. That's all I got to do. So they're going to win that seat just because they can, not because they actually had a better candidate with better ideas, or they even put any effort into governing. And when he gets there, Herschel Walker, he's exactly what Mitch McConnell wants. He'll just vote whatever way we tell him. That's really what they're after.
How old is he now, by the way? Like
54, 55, 53, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain. I mean, I feel a deep connection to Herschel Walker just because I remember, I think it was 82, 83-ish when he was doing what he was doing in Georgia, and just what a national story it was. So I think he's going to be very difficult to beat just on name value alone. And he doesn't have to do one iota worth of campaigning. A campaign stop for Herschel Walker is yell, how about those dogs, tell a football story, shout Walker, Trump 2024, and you walk off the stage. It's pretty pretty straightforward. So I think that's a seat that they're gonna lose. The J.D. Vance thing, yeah, he's gone completely insane, and I think it's going to cost him that seat in Ohio.
I will say, though, that, again, I think the headwinds are against some of the Democrats do have a good candidate in Ohio. They have Tim Ryan, who's the congressman who identifies well with blue-collar workers and has been a fighter for them and was one of those who did a vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker and has always separated himself when the national brand has been toxic. So there is that,
Something I wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about on warm-up is Elon Musk and his quest to buy Twitter and that whole 3-week saga and kind of where we're at and kind of what people's thoughts are on Elon Musk and Twitter.
Yeah, well, and so the latest thing for people to follow is that Twitter's basically their board put forward that poison pill, which is a common tactical corporate maneuver, and which blocked him. Now he's still trying to find investors to go in with him and to circumvent that. But I haven't heard any more in terms of the last couple of days if there's been any movement there on where he is.
I think the poison pill was if somebody owns 15% of stock, they have this massive release of new shares of stock that the person who owns the 15% can't buy.
Right.
So basically, if Elon Musk says, I'm going to pay 20% over your current stock value at $50 a share or whatever, what this does is, whereas before he had to buy, $48 billion worth of whatever. Now he has to buy $200 billion worth. So I think they've made it almost impossible for him to purchase it under his current plan. But what I found completely fascinated by this was that, somehow this is rigged or it's wrong if Elon Musk can't buy Twitter. Well, that's not the way this works.
No.
Just because you made a bid doesn't mean that you automatically get the company.
Right.
There's an approval process that the board has to go through and has to be voted on for them to sell the company.
Right.
If they don't want to sell it to you, it does not matter how much money you offered for it.
And Jack Dorsey, the founder and former president, is still on that board as well.
Yeah. And he was never going to join the board of directors. That was always silly because, again, you can't run around bitching and complaining about Twitter and saying things like we ought to make their source code and their algorithms public if you're on the board.
No, you can't do that.
That was never going to happen. So all of that was just kind of a fool's errand. And I don't think Elon Musk ever had any indication of, or he never wanted to join the board, and I don't think he's serious about buying Twitter either.
You think it's all just a publicity stunt?
It's just like what he does with Bitcoin. He just manipulates it for fun.
Yeah, I fail to understand like his long game or what he's attempting to do. He's one of those that has always had the label of eccentric, and so I don't I don't know.
And he offered 20% over the price of the stock. There is no percentage offer that triggers you automatically have to sell this to him.
Right.
So this was always a long shot bid at best that he would take this over.
And people are acting like it's not. And I mean,
DeSantis, that's what I don't get.
His response, like that somehow he was like denied. Like, no, this
he has
is
to
like
be investigated. He's calling for a congressional investigation.
Twitter,
of this.
yeah.
For what?
And he wants the Florida governing body board oversees the state pension system to have de-invest from Twitter as part of the pension system too. So that's...
And what I don't get is, Brandon, can you tell me what Elon Musk has done in the past that makes him a champion of the First Amendment and how him taking over Twitter would be miles better from a free speech standpoint than what we have?
Yeah, that's what I don't understand. Like, where's the substance there? Like, where's the proof in the pudding? I
mean, Elon Musk has manipulated the price of Bitcoin multiple times through tweets. I think Elon Musk is going to fart around and get himself in trouble with the SEC. Because certainly when he bought the Twitter stock that he bought, I think they saw a spike in their price by like 26%. Where is that now? When is he going to exit this? What's he going to make on his exit? I'm not sure what Elon Musk is doing, and I'm not sure why everybody is just all of a sudden assigned all of this capital to Elon Musk that he can fix this. I don't know what again,
I feel like not unlike Trump or other personalities, he's somebody that people know of who's in the news all the time, sometimes dumb, sometimes interesting, sometimes thought-provoking. And so people just latch onto him and just, put their feelings, thoughts, desires onto him as a vessel. because it's weird that people would be like, "Oh yeah, he's pro First Amendment." Like,
you
I'd love to
sure?
see him take it. Like, based on what?
Has he written about it?
Yeah.
Has he given speeches on it? Did he study the
I don't see
Constitution?
any of that. No, he's
I mean,
not
what-
somebody who seems to be.
Okay, he's pissed that Trump's off Twitter. Okay, that makes him a First Amendment free speech champion.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's like, give me a break.
I don't know.
As a side note about Elon Musk, I heard this recently, which is crazy. Apparently, he is like super thrifty. Like his
I've heard that,
girlfriend partner, like she had a hole in her mattress, and he wouldn't buy a new mattress until like the mattress was literally falling apart. And apparently, like he never stays at hotels or Airbnbs. Like when he's traveling, like he'll try to stay with friends and say, "Hey, do you have a bed available?" And he'll just try to crash randomly with friends, and he'll call his Silicon Valley friends and crash with them.
See, that's not quirky. That's mental illness.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like,
that's not a positive.
You're the world's richest man, and you're trying to bum a couch off of a friend.
I wouldn't be putting that out there. That's how I roll.
Well, and he apparently doesn't even have like a real physical home either.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's very bizarre, and that's what I've always thought that there's something off there, like a few screws loose with him. I don't know, just because he always is kind of just randomly shooting from the. I don't know.
Someone's going to have to explain to me why one tech billionaire who owns a social media company that you have a problem with over something, either free speech or just pick what you're is. Now we're swapping them out for another billionaire. How is this?
This is different.
How is this different? We're just simply replacing one person for another, but you're projecting onto Elon Musk this champion of free speech and your political values, and you're really just putting the thumb in the eye of Twitter, which is what this is really all about.
Well, and this is a person who wants to be able to have all this authority to make all these decisions himself. I mean, he like dictate like that.
Yeah.
You know, Twitter's going to do this, and I'm going to reveal the algorithm, and this is like, why should one richest man in the world be the person to make all those decisions? Like you said, like that's
this
better.
this is the cult of entrepreneurship that we're all worshiping at right now.
Yeah.
You just made a great point. So Elon Musk wants to take the world's largest communication platform, take it out of the accountability that he would have as CEO as a public company, and make it a private one where he can do with it whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's doing that because of some burning desire or passion he has for the First Amendment and free speech.
Yeah, I don't think there's like a public cause attached to that.
No.
I don't think it's Yeah.
The
Altruistic?
news is,
not at all.
and how the news freaked out about this was very strange.
Yeah.
I mean, MSNBC and CNN just had meltdowns that this was
Apoplectic over it.
yeah, that this was going to be the end of democracy because he was going to take over Twitter. It's like, how? Where do you come up with stuff like this? The biggest thing he would do is let Trump and Alex Jones back on. Okay, great. Is that really what we're fighting about? I tried to find a list the other day of how many people are banned from Twitter right now. Because if we say that the most clear form of restricting speech is banning speech, how many people are actually banned from Twitter right now?
There aren't that many actually at all.
I don't think there's that many. My point again is
even like people like Marjorie Taylor Greene have had temporary bans, but they've never been permanently banned.
Nobody ever explains the size and shape of the problem. This is how many people were banned. This is why they were banned. This is their tweets that got them banned. Do we agree or disagree?
Yeah.
I think that's where, again, I think people like Musk are using, and DeSantis a little bit like this too, they're taking something that would be described as a niche issue and blowing it up into something that's way bigger and trying to make it an issue that they can get something else accomplished on the backs of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
I just don't trust Elon Musk at all.
I don't either. There's no altruism on his part at all.
There's not. Before we get into Ukraine, we had one other topic, but I completely forgot it.
The McCarthy and the reporting.
McCarthy. That's right.
Yeah.
So your boy Kevin just can't. Brandon, he just can't seem to keep himself out of trouble.
Well, it's I do. I think it was Sarah Longwell described this moment as Liz Cheney's righteous rage, which I really liked, and I think that's a perfect encapsulation of what transpired. Because here, the irony is, you had McCarthy boot Cheney off of her leadership post as conference chair over telling the truth about what happened on January 6th and the president's role in it. And here we have audio recording of McCarthy saying the same exact things.
Exact same thing.
And saying that Trump was partially responsible for what happened, and that he should resign, and that he actually counseled Trump to resign.
Yeah.
So, and then how much later was it? Was it days later that he then went to Mar-a-Lago on a pilgrimage and groveled and had this complete 180-degree change of heart, and then goes after Liz Cheney for saying what he said? So there's the rank hypocrisy. There's also just the rank deceit, because he lied about this, and he lied right before the tapes were released as well about what he said. And so, but again, the overarching question we always get back to, will this matter? Will this have an impact?
Yes.
And I don't think it will. I think he's still going to be in the good graces of the MAGA crowd. His first phone call after this was made public was to Donald Trump, again, groveling to make sure he still had his support, because if he loses Trump's support, then he loses the support of the MAGA faction of the House, and he can't win re-election as Speaker.
No.
So he looks to be in good standing still. I don't hear a lot of members of Congress that are speaking publicly about this and chastising him or criticizing him. It's the same people. It's people like Adam Kinzinger, who have already been critical this entire time.
What I love about this is number one, it had to be Liz Cheney that made that recording and dropped the dime on him. Because I think the recording that I heard, it's only two of them on the phone. So I love it that the fact that Liz recorded this and decided to put this out there as the January 6th committee starts kind of entering into its final phases. You've accused Kevin McCarthy in the past of not being the brightest bulb in the chandelier, so to speak.
Far from it, yeah.
If you want to see how a veteran politician handles that, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
As they're shouting things at McConnell about this, McConnell says nothing, walks by, just gives that completely indifferent look and just goes about his business. McCarthy not only addresses it, lies about it.
Yeah.
And lies about it for what purpose?
Yeah.
I mean, we talked before. If you were in Congress right now, you would assume everybody you talk to is recording everything.
Right.
Everybody's covering their ass 6 ways to Sunday. Why not just give the non-answer answer and then whip up your excuse or whatever your path's going to be once the tape comes out? He had to know this was going to surface at some point. Why come out so strong, giving that full-throated, I never said that. If they wanted an accurate quote, they could have talked to me. Nobody ever talked to me. We didn't have to because we had your voice on tape.
Yeah.
How that man just continuously,
over
people dig
and over.
a hole in front of him and say, I bet you won't. And he just throws himself in it every single time.
And let's not forget, McCarthy is dumb as a rock. He's been the beneficiary of circumstance and the moment, because he assumed the speakership when Paul Ryan threw in the towel and said he was done and had enough, and McCarthy just happened to be next in line based on the leadership positioning. And he's always been has had a ability to glad hand very well in terms of other colleagues. And people have always described him as very stupid, but, kind of like ho-hum, likable, friendly. Yeah. He just has this, camaraderie to him, that this rapport that he can build. And so that's always done him well. But clearly now that he's, in a position of ultimate leadership and, his lies are coming home to roost, you see that there's no substance there. I mean, he has no substance. He isn't able to explain anything away. He can't stop talking for the life of himself. And it's just, even when it's come to policing, disciplining his own members like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Madison Cawthorn, he can't do it. Or he'll give some stupid statement about how he talked to them and they realized it was wrong, and then immediately someone like Madison Cawthorn will come out and say, no, I didn't agree to that, and just. And
I know we missed this whole thing, but I love how freaked out Republicans get when one of their own says something weirdly horny about the Republican Party.
Oh, about the orgies?
Yeah. Because Republicans have been clipped a couple times in recent memory on kind of weird sex stuff.
Yeah.
Who was remember the congressional page or the congressional intern scandal?
Back in 2006. Yeah, that was at the height of the Democrats gaining control of Congress. That was Mark Foley. And I believe the Republicans didn't make the gains they wanted to in those elections, and part of it they
was
lost the House.
Directly tied
That was when Pelosi made the culture of corruption mantra
Yes.
that really resonated.
So,
yeah.
It's easier. There's no good way to say this. It's easier for a Democrat to come off as creepy than a Republican.
Yeah.
Because Republicans, because of the stance they take on certain social issues, it just makes their hypocrisy shine brighter, and it sticks to them in a way that it doesn't stick to Republicans. And Madison Cawthorn found out one of the golden rules: you don't link sex scandal to Republicans. Right. We're just not going to do that.
We're not going to buy it. That was the thing that got them most upset, right? Because it wasn't like racism
Correct.
or white supremacy
We don't give a shit
or
about that.
any of that other stuff. January 6th, but oh my gosh, we're going to go into full crisis mode over orgies and drunkenness.
I believe Madison Cawthorn because he's 26. I think.
Yeah,
what
he's
26-year-old knows what key bump of coke means, Brandon.
Right.
He had to hear that from somebody, at least
Yeah.
in their 50s or 60s. I believe the key bump was it was impolite to stick your hand into the bag of cocaine, so you put your key in there and dump some out
that's
that way.
what that means.
I
Okay.
only know that because of movies, but I'm pretty sure that's what he was referring to. I didn't mean to go down that hole, but that was just so funny to watch him squirm and watch McCarthy finally show some spine to one of his members, but we had to get to
Over that
orgy
issue.
key coke bump
Yeah.
before he finally swung into action. Is there any way? I think we all know the Republicans are going to take back the House in the midterms.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. Is there any way he holds on to the speakership?
I don't know. I think that will remain up in the air as long as there's discontent among the MAGA faction, and he still has never been able to consolidate support 100% among that faction. And so, yeah, I think, and again, I think that this leak was done with the intention of trying to create and further that dissent and those divisions, which I think was very smart on Liz Cheney's part, if it was Liz Cheney, because I think the more headaches that can be caused for McCarthy, I'm all for it. Like, bring on the popcorn and let's watch this explode.
I think as partisan as we are right now, Americans still will not vote for a fool.
Yeah.
We don't care what our political allegiance is. This is the problem David Perdue has in Georgia. You were made a fool out of by Donald Trump and how you lost your Senate seat, and you've decided to jump right back in bed with him to make yourself a fool again to try to win the governorship.
Yeah, and it's not paying off so far.
People are not going to vote for people they don't respect and they find to be complete fools.
Right.
Kevin McCarthy is rapidly gaining ground in that area because he's just foolish. Yeah. And the game to him, he just lays it all in front of you. I will do anything to grab that brass ring of power. I don't care. I will debase myself in any way I have to get it. And Trump's superpower is Trump doesn't like a person that will grovel. You got to do more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, he seeks people out like McCarthy that he literally knows he can insert his hand inside of him and work him like a puppet in any way he wants.
Yeah.
And that he knows Kevin McCarthy has no self-respect left, and he'll do anything for the promise of grabbing at that brass ring. And as long as what percentage of the Republican Party fits into that mold at some point, Trump's going to remain in power because there's just nobody going to stand up to him.
As long as there's a willing contingent to just, be puppets for him.
I'm telling you, if he gets those 3 senators elected and has like a 60% hit rate on endorsements, everybody falls in line for 2024. That's Trump basically clearing the field to say, if I want it, I'll just take it again if I want to.
That'll be the ultimate test. We'll see. I don't know. Because I think you're right. I think that obviously some of his endorsed candidates will not win and are not leading in the polls. But on the Senate side, where it matters, on the House side, all he needs is, I think, a majority to say, hey, I'm the leader. People believe what I say.
I had somebody text me the other day talking about Trump, how that we should have done anything we could have done to stop Trump from being able to run again. And part of my answer to that was, wait a minute, this guy got more people voted against him than any other person at the history of time who ran for president.
Yeah.
Didn't Joe Biden got like 81 million votes or something like that? Those were 81 million votes against Donald Trump.
And it was the largest win by a challenger to an incumbent since Herbert Hoover was defeated by FDR back in 19...
I think the American people clearly came out and said, we that guy is a non-starter.
Yeah.
Because we picked this other guy who we knew we were going to have problems with just to stay away from that guy.
Right.
If you want to run that guy again, a guy that got 81 million people mobilized enough to vote against him, have at it.
Yeah.
Please do. That's the only chance the Dems have in 2024 of retaining the presidency is if Donald Trump runs. That's the only chance we have. Because Biden's not running again. There's no way. I don't care if he met with Obama and told him. There's no way.
No, and now we're entering this phase figuring out who's going to be the heir apparent, and that's
going to be a 2-year, just absolute bloodbath fight.
Yeah.
There's just no way. Harris or Mayor Pete, is that going to be our options? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not excited about either one of those.
I mean, I prefer Mayor Pete over Harris just because I think he's more articulate and more able to, I think, speak and get out the trail.
He's also never won a race in the state of Indiana.
He's never won a statewide race.
He's never won anything.
Yeah.
So
he's only won a mayoral race, so that's the issue.
Let's switch to our last topic on Ukraine. I thought it's been like 5 or 6 weeks since we podcasted. I thought the Ukrainian war would be over by now, that Russia would have taken whatever it decided to take in Ukraine. For me, that was Kiev. They would link up with the folks from Donbass.
Clearly, Russia thought this would be done in days, like maybe 5 days max. And so I think that the incompetence of the Russian military, their inability to supply and resource their military was put on full display. There's a lot there that is, I think, pretty embarrassing from the Russian standpoint. And they underestimated the will of the Ukrainians to fight back and to be resourceful, with limited resources. So I think that that's uncharted. But the key thing people need to remember is that Putin doesn't just give up. The war in Chechnya dragged on for years and years and years. The war in Georgia was over the course of years. Yeah. If you look at where Putin has flexed his muscle, he will continue fighting until he's able to extract something of value that he can take home and run on. And so that's where we are. It's somewhat of a, they weren't able to take Kiev. They weren't able to take the capital, most of the West. They have this new strategy there now where they're trying to take the East and those two regions where they've dubbed breakaway regions, Donbass and Luhansk. And then wrap around the southern part of the country to connect with Crimea so that they have routes and a land bridge for transportation. So I think that's where we are now. It kind of remains to be seen how successful they will be in the long term. They are bleeding soldiers and military equipment. Yeah. The Russians are this isn't, their markets and their economy are suffering. I just saw an article that I forget her name. I would be able to pronounce it correctly either, but the head of the Russian bank, I think her last name is Nebulina. So Putin has been putting out very rosy pictures saying, look, we're fine. The sanctions that work. Well, the problem is Russia's reserves are drastically running out. And so their financial markets were most impacted by the sanctions so far, but their economy for the most part wasn't impacted in terms of day-to-day, other than some shortages and price increases in some specific sectors. But their bank, central bank head, she came out and said, the time is working against us. We have very little reserves left. We're almost at the point where, our economy is going to start cratering from this. So just because it hasn't happened yet, people forget with sanctions, it's a long game. And particularly because so many of the reserves that are in Western currency are frozen, they can't draw upon those. So they are quickly eating up what they have, and then there won't be any left. So again, they've been able to pay their debtors and do all that up until this point, but that's not going to last forever. And as long as the sanctions are lifted, you're going to see things turn domestically in a way we haven't seen before. And so again, I'll reiterate, this is what the economists are forecasting, that there's going to be anywhere from an 8 to 15% drop in GDP in Russia, and a contraction, I should say, contraction in GDP in Russia. And it's going to be, as far as the economic impact and collapse, it's going to be the worst since the early 90s when they came out of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. That's where we're at.
One of the things that's sticking with me through this invasion is that for the second time in my lifetime, the United States government and the United States media has completely lied to me about the capabilities of the Soviet Union / Russian military. All the time growing up, we were led to believe that the Soviet Union had a military capable of fighting on multiple fronts on a worldwide stage. And we had to have the military size and strength that we had to have to fight that. That turned out to be completely not true when the Soviet Union completely collapsed, and we found out that for decades they couldn't even feed themselves. The idea of them having a multiple war, fighting a world war on multiple fronts around the globe was a complete lie.
Yeah.
Then we fell for that lie again. Remember 2 years ago when they fired off the hypersonic missile and everybody shit their pants about how great the Russian military is? People like Hugh Hewitt are calling for, a second missile generation of growth in our missile technology like we did in the 50s when there was Sputnik and all of that shit. Remember when we were so far behind the Russian military, it was a national disaster, and it was Biden and Obama's fault that we fell that far. Remember all of that?
Yeah.
Then it comes to find out they can't supply themselves.
No.
They don't have an officer corps. To me, the Russia invasion...
They haven't invested in their military at all.
This would be like the state of Missouri, my home state, tells America we're going to invade you because we have the military power to do it, and then we can't take Kansas.
Right.
So we say, we'll start with Kansas because we're bigger than them. We walk across the border, and we just get slaughtered. Yeah. So why I go down this rant is the logical next point is China. Now I don't believe anything anybody has said about the Chinese military and their capabilities. Because twice in my lifetime, I've been told we have to dump all of these resources, especially around the Soviet Union. We have to tailor almost our entire economy to support a military to fight these people. That was a complete lie. And then we hear that was a complete lie too. So when China does something, I'm not just going to automatically believe that.
No.
I think I'm going to have to be shown what China's military capabilities are.
I feel like we make so many of our assumptions on such limited intelligence, and that's part of the problem.
The hypersonic missile.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom Cotton used a full week's worth of news cycles to talk about how our military just absolutely sucked, and we were so far behind Russia, and this meant technologically, from a culture standpoint, our military was just in shambles compared to Russia. Well, that just showed me...
The Russians
didn't know any of that.
The Russians can't even fuel their tanks.
Right.
I mean,
they can't even put a plan together, and they invaded their neighbor. Their neighbor,
right? And they're a bunch of 19-year-olds. These are 19-year-olds that are ill-fed, ill-clothed, that are fighting Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine.
And I've heard too, the reason they've lost so many generals is because generals call up to the front to do something, and the frontline officers are like, "I ain't doing that. We're not doing that." So many of their generals have had to take forward-facing command of units. That's why like 5 or 6 of them have died.
Have been killed, yeah.
I struggle with if you look at where
Do you know that they've already
is,
lost more troops so far in this war against Ukraine? And how long has it been? 6-8 weeks.
It's been like 59 days or something like that.
Then they lost during the entire war when they were fighting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I mean,
they've just
and that was over a decade.
But I just don't know what to think anymore of these types of reports about what another country's military capabilities are. Because I felt like we've been lied to so many times.
Well, and again, like we were told that Russia will take the country in mere days. Like it's going to be quick. It's going to be swift.
48 hours to Kiev.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just none of that's happened. And what I don't get too is, have you seen these Turkish drones that are causing them so many problems?
I think I saw some photos.
They look like a wooden model plane. They look like something a high school woodshop project would make. And apparently they just simply fly over and drop an explosive on a tank. Brandon, why are we making tanks? I mean, I've been watching videos of people from Ukraine. Britain has something called an in-law. It's the shoulder-fired rocket. It's not as fancy as the Javelin. It's only straight line and all of this. These things cost $1,200 to make, and they're just taking out tanks all over the place. Do we have the same tanks as Russia? If we invaded, would we have the same deal? Part of what I've struggled with watching the Russian story and the invasion, just from a straight military perspective, is what does all this military technology mean? Yeah. And what does it mean to the U.S. and what our foreign policy should be watching Russia wade into Ukraine and have the results that they've gotten? because the Ukrainians are fighting them using very low-tech weapons, and they seem to be having a great deal of success. Is that all on the Russian military? Is that all on the willingness to fight of the Ukrainians? I don't know what I'm looking at anymore, because I'm still going off the information, like you just said. Kiev will fall in 2 days.
Right.
It's a week to the country, and Russia has the fourth most powerful military in the world, which means they'll just crush another country. None of that has turned out to be true.
No, not at all. So it's difficult to decipher. And I mean, I think we've for such a long time correlated Russia's nuclear strength and missile strength with their military strength, when those two are completely far apart. They may have the scientists and the capabilities when it comes to having the largest nuclear stockpile in the world, and that's one thing, but that doesn't translate to their overall military capabilities, which are not there.
Well, if I'm any country that's on the emerging scale, I need a nuclear weapon right now.
Yeah.
Their stockpile of nuclear weapons is the only thing keeping Russia on the map.
Yeah.
Because without those, NATO would have wiped them out.
Oh, a long time
day
ago.
one.
Yeah.
So I guess if I'm a country that wants to see my way onto the international stage, I have to do it with nuclear weapons intact, because that's the only thing that really is keeping the balance right now.
And let's not forget that Russia, the reasoning for this was to stop what they call the expansion of NATO. You now have Sweden and Finland that want to join NATO and are going to hold referendums on that. And so, their action, their provocation has only, I think, emboldened the unity in NATO that, some have said before was lacking, which I think is true. I mean, NATO's never been more unified, more resolved, and you have other countries now that are saying, we want to join now because we see the threat posed from Russia. So it's been a just complete misfire by Russia's part in terms of what they were trying to accomplish with this.
And Ukraine's only in this situation because they gave up their nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
They signed a treaty with Russia that said, you'll never invade us if we give up these nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
What's a better world, Brandon? Emerging countries trying to develop nuclear weapons, or the United States playing the defensive role for them, and we get into more direct military conflict?
Well, I do think if it's emerging countries developing nuclear weapons on their own, that's going to produce more volatility and more unpredictability.
Yeah.
Because some of these countries don't have the stable political environments or infrastructure. Governments can fall and be toppled, and you don't know who's going to be in charge and what's going to happen. And that's what gives me the greatest concern is governments that have nuclear capabilities where, these unstable countries like Pakistan. Yeah. That's one that has always unnerved me, because that's a nuclear power, has always had an element of instability, and, if things go sour, nuclear weapons can fall in the wrong hands. All it takes is one accident, one misfire, and then a nuclear war erupts.
If I'm Pakistan, I would ask this question. Do you think the presence of our nukes is the only thing that has stopped us from being in a war with India? If Pakistan did not have nuclear weapons, India would have taken over Pakistan by now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep. So if you're any type of borderline rogue nation, if you're North Korea, Iran, the path forward is you must be nuclear.
Yeah, I remember.
That's the only thing that's going to save it off.
I think in college world geography course, we called those fault line states that were right there, that the point of tension with the neighboring country, that had gone back years or perhaps, decades. But if you see where the nuclear ambitions are, which countries have gained nuclear weapons, they've all been those fault line states.
And I think we're about roughly 2 months into this war. It feels like we're settling in for the long haul.
Yeah.
That Russia knows they can't take Kyiv. They're not going to. They're going to take those areas in the south and the southeast. They're going to try to take Odessa, cut them off from a port perspective, and try to make 2 Ukraines, basically, is what they're going to try to do.
Do you think, because people keep saying this, but nobody has an answer for it, which it makes me think that there isn't any opportunity there. The people who say, well, we need to find some kind of exit strategy for Putin where he can save face and then we can end this war. But I don't see what that is. Nobody gives an example of what that would be. Like, what would that be where Putin could go home and say, see, without giving away like major chunks of the country of Ukraine in the process?
There's no way, because it would be, he's already laid out. I want the 2 regions that I've already taken over. I want you to sign a deal, basically aligning yourself with Russia, and promises you'll never join the EU or NATO. And
Right.
they're just not going to do that.
Those are
You just
non-starters.
don't have a country
Yeah.
left after that.
No.
Those are non-starters. So should we give him an off ramp? So there's part of me that says, why? He stepped in it. I understand that we're talking about people's lives, and the toll on this is based in human life. But part of it is you got yourself into this mess, get yourself out of this mess.
And he's never really been forced to get himself out of a mess.
No,
before.
don't bail him out.
Yeah.
And when one of your political enemy, one of your geopolitical enemies is making this kind of mistake, why should we help you out? I get it. The reason why is people are dying and people are suffering, and it's the moral thing to do. But on the geopolitical stage,
again, if we want a more stable world, do we want to bail him out, or is that? I mean, because I think that emboldens him, and that just there's So again, I think we have to. Yeah, I'm of the same mindset you are. I think that we have to let him live with his decision, that he has to find a way out himself, and that eventually we need to find some way to just kind of hope and support for there to be regime change in Russia, something of that nature to where, there's a change in the paradigm, because I don't know, as long as he's in power, I don't see much changing.
If I'm Ukraine, I would just ask, that's a great plan. Is there any number on us that can be killed to get you to change your mind?
Yeah.
Because the only thing that the practical application of your plan is just more of my people are dying every day in horrible ways.
Well, I do struggle with and roll my eyes at the fact that I think we play a little bit too much in the weeds and the nuance of the type of weapons we provide, what we're not going to provide, what we will, only defensive capabilities, but we're not going to provide offensive weaponry. And I think there's probably more we can do to that end, and I think slowly we've been increasing our weapon transfers to them.
As more people have died and Russian atrocities have gotten
But trying to find this
we're giving you more
differentiation
weapons.
between defensive and offensive, like it's a war at this point.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
It
that's
doesn't
out the
matter.
window.
Yeah.
Like, just give them the weapons they
Yeah.
need to use, and and because we're not going to declare a no-fly zone. We're not going to get directly involved in terms of combat or in terms of air operations. Like that, those are all known knowns. But there's more we can do in terms of providing them weapons and equipment, and so just do that to the max that we're willing to do.
I think Ukraine knows we're going to give you just enough to continue fighting. We're not going to give you the weapons that give you the offensive capabilities to go into Russia. We don't want that type of escalation. And we're not going to do anything that directly can link NATO into this fight.
But not to go into Russia, but I think offensive enough to push back, especially in those two breakaway regions, even push Russia back out of that. And, I think the parts of the country that they've been operating in really illegally for the past couple of years, that we have just, kind of not done anything about or said until it came to a head.
We could have done that years ago.
Well, yeah, we could have.
I mean, that's the thing.
But we've done so time and time again, right? We did do anything when they went into Georgia in 2007, 2008. We did do anything when they went to Crimea back in 2014. So again, it's like one Russian provocation, aggression after the next. That we did not, and that goes all the way to not only just not getting involved, but we didn't exercise any type of punishment against Russia, in terms of kicking them off of the UN Security Council.
Yeah.
They were still allowed to host the Olympics. I mean, all of these things, that we could have taken away prior years, and we didn't.
Yeah, I don't. I think this is going to be a long haul. I think that this is going to modify the West's approach around the world, because the next country that we say, go ahead and give the weapons up. We'll protect you. We'll be no, you're not.
They're not going to. Yeah,
no, you're not going to do that.
This is going to be a case. I think for the future.
Yeah, I think so. All right, Brandon. It's been like 6 weeks since we've seen each other.
That's a long time.
What exciting is happening in your world? We never really have anything exciting.
Yeah, it's. I'm looking forward to baseball season. I've not been to a game yet. I'm definitely looking forward to getting out to some games now that that's settled.
Here's what drives me crazy about the Royals. We have one 10-game losing streak before Mother's Day, which basically ends the season for us. Then we have another 10-game losing streak sometime around July, and the rest of the season we play 3 games over 500. We do it all the time.
Yeah.
We have that huge losing streak that ends the season before it starts. We have another one somewhere in the middle just to make sure we're dead. But then we play pretty decently outside of those two streaks.
Very predictable, yeah.
And baseball has just turned into a game where you're just waiting for the 3-run homer. We just can't hit 3-run homers. We just don't have enough guys that can hit the ball.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, ever since the World Series win, I mean, that was our riding high moment.
Yeah.
And then after that, just...
It's going to take a lot to get back to that, to that moment. But
what about you?
It's nice having just baseball on in the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I haven't done anything really fun in 6 weeks. Like I said, I was down with my mom and dad in Florida helping him. So that's been a lot. But yeah, the last 6 weeks for me have been it's been a blur of just, routine and things like that. But I was
going to say, that would suck a lot out of you. So there isn't really a whole lot of time for much else outside of that.
The government should have some program that as an adult, you should be able to say, listen, I need to become the caregiver for my elderly parents. And there should be some way that you can keep 60% of your salary for 18 months or something to provide care for a family member. It just brought home that whole experience. Number one, how difficult it is dealing with the healthcare system.
Yeah.
How many people you have to deal with and how much you have to do on your own.
Yeah.
How many things you have to track, how many calls you have to make, how many things you have to keep track of. And as you get older, these things all become harder. So anything that we could do in any way to help just people take care of their own family would be great. But I don't know. The healthcare system is it's a strange process.
It's a long-standing problem.
Yeah. And where I am at in my life at 52, this is sooner than later. This is coming. And, when I was 30, I thought, well, by the time I'm 50, they'll have this solved. Well, by the time I'm 70, I don't put much faith that that's going to happen at this point.
Yeah.
So, healthcare system, it's a strange one. But you also realize, too, how many people are employed by healthcare?
Right.
And when Kamala Harris says, we'll just get rid of that or we'll just change that you're talking about millions of people's lives.
Yeah.
And just you cannot make flippant comments about people's health, especially people who have health needs.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.